Welcome to F107, Planning, Programming, Budgeting, and Execution, Ppbe. In this video, we'll cover the key highlights of Ppbe's role in Army Force Management. Since most of the previous F107 video is still current, I'll provide a link to it at the end of this video and in the description below. In previous lessons, we covered how strategic guidance flows from national documents like the National Security Strategy, the National Defense Strategy, and joint-level documents such as the capstone concept for joint operations. Based on this, the Army creates its own capstone and operating concepts, guiding requirements generation and capability development through systems like JSIDS, CBA. These capabilities then compete for resources in the total Army analysis, which determines the Army structure and forms the foundation for program development in Ppbe. The Ppbe process consists of 4 interconnected phases: planning, programming, budgeting, and execution. Each phase has distinct tasks and deliverables, and they overlap and iterate to ensure a continuous and adaptive approach to resource allocation. The Future Years Defense Program, FYDP, is the DoD's long-term resource allocation plan. It outlines forces, personnel, and financial resources across all services and funding categories, including operations and maintenance, military personnel, procurement, RDT&E, and military construction. It also covers activities like military assistance, NATO efforts, and humanitarian aid. The FYDP includes both historical and projected data for the previous year, current year, and the next 5 years. DoD programs are organized into 12 major force programs covering service-specific and joint initiatives. This slide introduces the end state of planning, programming, and budgeting to produce a balanced plan, program, and defense budget for the combatant commanders. You will discuss this slide a little later. This is just an introduction to give you an idea of where the lesson is going to be headed. This slide provides a basic overview of the Ppbe process and key personnel responsible for each phase in the Army. As the DoD's primary resource management system, Ppbe creates a plan, program, and budget to support combatant commanders with the best mix of forces, equipment, and manpower within fiscal limits. Its 2 main outputs are the Future Years Defense Program, the FYDP, and the DoD's budget request, part of the President's budget. The Army's Ppbe process aligns strategy, programs, and budgets. Key personnel include ASA, FM&C for oversight, G357 for planning, the G8 and Director of Program Analysis and Evaluation for programming, and the Military Deputy for budgeting and execution. These roles ensure a properly equipped Army within budget. This slide shows how the Ppbe process connects with total Army analysis. It represents the ideal process flow, though real-world events may cause deviations. The key takeaway here is how the Program Objective Memorandum, or POM, build for FY26 to 30, which is part of the programming phase, starts right after TAA. Once the program is finalized, the budgeting phase begins, starting with the development of the Budget Estimate Submission, or BES. You can see that while the POM for FY27 to 31 is being built, the FY25 budget is already being executed, and the FY26 budget is being debated by Congress. The specifics of Ppbe's development and submission will be covered a little later, so we don't need to focus on that quite right now. Another critical observation is that while we're currently conducting TAA, we are making decisions about the Army of 2031. Though 2031 may seem far away, decisions made today will shape the Army's structure in that year. You've seen this slide before. Now we want to view these planning inputs as key influencers in the development of the Army's program. Programming is the process of translating guidance and objectives into actions that allocate resources effectively to produce combat capability. Programmers must balance multi-year resource needs, integrating various capabilities into a cohesive, prioritized program. The DoD's Ppbe process is iterative, simultaneously executing the current budget, developing the next year's budget, and planning for future years. Program evaluation groups, PEGs, are essential to the Army's Ppbe process, focusing on building the Program Objective Memorandum, or POM, and Budget Estimate Submission, BES. Co-chaired by Assistant Secretaries of the Army and Army staff, with ACOM commanders advising, PEGs manage resources for Title X functions and support combatant commands. PEGs define resource requirements within their programs, organized into Management Decision Execution Packages, MDEPs. They ensure programs align with guidance, have measurable outcomes, and are properly costed. PEGs also review command priorities and adjust programs to balance affordability with mission requirements. Guided by the Army Program Guidance Memorandum, APGM, and Technical Guidance Memorandum, TGM, PEGs help prioritize resources. As of March 2024, 5 PEGs manage 542 MDEPs containing over 5,000 Army program elements. This slide outlines the structure of a Management Decision Execution Package, or MDEP, using the Multiple Launch Rocket System, MLRS, as an example. MDEPs break down into Army Program Elements, or APEs, which represent specific activities needing resources aligned with appropriation types like O&M, procurement, MILCON, RDT&E, MILPER, or MILPER. MDEPs are Army-specific tools detailing manpower and financial resources over multiple years for the active Army, Guard, Reserve, and civilians. Each MDEP is assigned to a Program Evaluation Group, a PEG, and allows detailed tracking of resource needs, which are monitored by OSD and Congress using Program Elements, or PEs. This slide illustrates how the Department of Defense allocates resources through 12 major force programs, each containing program elements from all services. Each program element is funded by one or more appropriation categories, such as operations and maintenance. Appropriations are critical because they link DoD's funding needs to Congress. The Army's funding is received from Congress in 21 appropriation categories, each monitored by an appropriation sponsor. Just like with MDEPs, all Army funding, TOA, Total Obligation Authority, is organized by appropriations, and each TOA dollar is assigned to only one appropriation. This slide illustrates how the 4 Army program elements, APEs, from the MLRS MDEP are translated into DoD program elements, or PEs, and grouped within the DoD's Future Years Defense Program, the FYDP. Each PE is aligned with a specific appropriation shown on the right, such as O&M or procurement. The PEs are also connected to one of the 12 major force programs, represented by numbers like 6 for MLRS HIMARS, which corresponds to MFP6, Research and Development. This cube model demonstrates the linkage between Army MDEPs and DoD's system. It shows how Army resources are integrated into the broader DoD FYDP, where each services program elements are organized and managed under similar structures. The annual budget process begins when the President submits the budget request to Congress, usually in early February, for the fiscal year starting in October. The Army presents and defends its portion of the budget through hearings with congressional committees, overseen by the Chief Legislative Liaison and the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Financial Management. The Senate and House Armed Services Committees hold authorization hearings, while appropriations subcommittees review the budget request. Key Army leaders like the Secretary of the Army and Chief of Staff of the Army testify, followed by detailed presentations from budget officials. Once the committees finish their review, they mark up the bills and the House and Senate vote on them. Differences between the two versions are resolved in conference committee. After both chambers approve, the bills are sent to the President for signature. Authorization bills create or continue programs, while appropriation bills allow the Treasury to incur financial obligations. The process ends when the President signs both bills, legally authorizing the Army's budget for the next fiscal year. Both authorization and appropriation are required for DoD operations. If Congress fails to pass the bill and bills, and the President does not sign these bills by the 1st of October, a continuing resolution can be enacted to keep the government operating. A CR is a temporary measure that typically limits funding to the previous year's level and prevents new programs or initiatives from starting. This slide illustrates the Army Resource Management System, detailing the flow of funds from Congress to Army installations. After Congress authorizes funds, the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, apportions them, followed by the Treasury issuing a warrant to release the funds. The Undersecretary of Defense, Comptroller, authorizes program execution, and Headquarters Department of the Army allocates funds to operating agencies. These funds are then allotted to major subordinate commands and installations, managed through systems like GFIBs, and the Army Budget Office, the ABO, conducts a mid-year review to evaluate budget execution and adjust as needed. Reprogramming allocates funds within the same appropriation or transfers them between appropriations to address financial shortfalls or adjust for unforeseen needs. This process is governed by dollar thresholds and requires congressional approval or notification. Transfers between appropriations cannot occur without Congress's prior written consent, submitted through a congressional reprogramming request, a DD 1415. So this has been an overview of F107. This overview has shown how the Ppbe process is cyclical and continuous, shaped by national DoD and Army level planning inputs. We talked about how the Army program evolves annually rather than being built from scratch. Now you understand that DoD's budget is included in the President's budget request and guided by Congress through authorization and appropriation bills, with built-in legal flexibility for addressing unforeseen circumstances during execution.